Welcome to CEPA in Conversation, where researchers at CEPA will give you insights into the research areas they're working on. Today with us is Chandima Arambepola, who is a senior researcher at CEPA and also leads the thematic labor migration. Hi Chandima.
Hi Natasha.
Can you tell us about the labor migration thematic and what you focus on?
Yes. So the labor migration thematic largely looks at the internal labor migration dynamics as well as the external labor migration dynamics. So we are looking at both aspects of migration, but also concentrating largely on the policy aspects of migration where migrant workers are concerned, and also looking at how policy is practiced on the ground. So we basically want to emphasize the fact that migrant workers also have a voice, and how they respond to policy, and policy also comes into play in this regard. The larger aspect of the thematic itself is to approach labor migration from a critique that considers migration for development as rather a narrow lens from which labor migration is to be understood.
In this situation we're faced with in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the lockdown and curfew that was imposed, what were the implications on migrant workers?
The implications are twofold. So it depends on whether you were an internal migrant worker or a migrant worker from Sri Lanka working elsewhere. I think if I focus a lot more on what happened to Sri Lankans living outside, the larger problem has been that they are unable to come home at a time when the economies or the workplaces that they were already employed in also have become quite unstable. So the problems that they have faced in terms of accessing some form of consular services from Sri Lanka, of being unable to come to Sri Lanka, I think are the larger implications that we are dealing with right now. In the longer term, I think, or in the shorter or the medium term, the larger questions will also be about once they are repatriated, how are we going to deal with the fact that we have a lot of migrant workers with a lot of skills who have come back to Sri Lanka, but then can our economy, which is also struggling during this time, absorb such skilled workers, and in what capacity?
These are really critical issues, and as researchers, how do we contribute in this situation?
Here, I think there are certain things that we can do on our part, because one of the main things that we realized during such issues or such emergency issues is the lack of verifiable data. If you ask anyone, they will tell you estimates of the number of migrant workers we have in Sri Lanka or who are living outside of Sri Lanka, and that makes it very difficult for the government or for the non-governmental sector or for any other development practitioner to come up with solutions that would reach out to all these migrant workers who are Sri Lankans. So data, gaps in data is something that CEPA can also contribute towards addressing by looking at the primary data that we collect and also complement what is already out there. On the other hand, I think there is a lot of push because the national labor migration policy is being revised. So hopefully in the coming months and the coming few months, we anticipate that we would be able to also kind of advocate with the government and other practitioners in looking at how to address issues of safe labor migration, and also look at this new aspect or new angle of the health issues that may actually impact migrant workers, those who are working overseas and those who are working also within Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Chandima. Stay tuned for more conversations with our researchers.